All right, let's dive into a legal story that honestly has everything. It sounds like it's straight out of a movie. We're talking a bounced check, a lawsuit for 1 million pesos, and a wild case of mistaken identity that went all the way to the top. And it all kicks off with a tiny amount of money. So where does this whole wild ride begin? Well, it starts right here, with a single check for just over 2,500 pesos. It was supposed to be a payment for a delivery, but it bounced. Reason? Account closed. It's frustrating for sure, but a pretty common headache for any business, right? But what if I told you that that tiny bounced check somehow ballooned into this? A court awarding 1 million pesos in moral damages. And that's not even counting the other fees. I mean, how on earth is that even possible? So that's the big mystery we're going to unravel today. How do you go from simply trying to collect a small, totally legitimate debt to suddenly being on the hook for a fortune? The answer, as you'll see, involves a messy paper trail, 2 people with the exact same name, and a legal principle that changes absolutely everything. Okay, so let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Before any lawyers, before any lawsuits, this was just a simple, everyday business deal that, well, went a little sideways. So here are the players. You've got Albenson Enterprises, the seller. They sell some steel plates to a company called Guaranteed Industries. Pretty standard stuff. But here's the first little wrinkle. Guaranteed pays with a check, but the check isn't from them. It's from a totally different company, L Woodworks. And then, boom, the check bounces. Now Albenson is left scratching their heads, trying to figure out who actually owes them the money. So Albenson does what any company would do. They basically have to become detectives, right? They've got this unpaid bill, this bad check, and they need to connect the dots between the company that got the steel and the company that wrote the check.
And you know what? Their investigation seems to build a rock-solid case. First, they check the buyer, Guaranteed Industries. Public records say its president is a guy named Eugenio S. Baltao. Okay, then they check the company that wrote the bad check, EL Woodworks. Guess what? Trade records show it's owned by Eugenio Baltao. And for the final piece of the puzzle, they ask the bank, whose signature is on this check? The bank and friends, Eugenio Baltao. I mean, from their point of view, all roads lead to one guy.
Feeling pretty sure they've got their man, Albenson's lawyers send a formal demand letter to this Eugenio S. Baltao. When he denies having anything to do with it, they pull the trigger. They file a criminal complaint. From their perspective, they're just using the legal system to get with the road. Seems reasonable. But this is the moment the whole story just flips on its head, because it turns out all that evidence, all that detective work, it was pointing to the wrong person. And here's the twist. It's an absolute classic. There wasn't just one Eugenio Baltao. There were 2. A father and a son, both working out of the same business address. So you have the father, Eugenio S. Baltao. He's the president of the company that bought the steel, and he's the one they sued. But it was the son, Eugenio Baltao III, who ran the other company, EL Woodworks, and who actually signed the bounce check. It was a simple, but as we'll see, incredibly costly case of mistaken identity. So you can imagine the criminal case against the father just completely falls apart. Even the court pointed out that it was way more likely Albenson had been dealing with the son all along. So with his name cleared, Baltao the father turns the tables. He files his own lawsuit, a massive one, against Albenson for dragging his name through the mud. And this is where it gets wild. Even though the courts basically admitted it was probably an honest mistake, they came down on Albenson like a ton of bricks. They awarded Baltao 1 million pesos for the wrongful suit, which later got cut to 500,000. But still, all of a sudden, the company that was just trying to collect a couple thousand pesos is facing a judgment that could sink them. Well, Albenson wasn't about to take that lying down. They appealed, and they kept appealing all the way to the Supreme Court of the Philippines. And at this point, the case wasn't really about a bounced check anymore. It was about something much, much bigger. The whole case now hinged on this really important legal idea called abuse of rights. So what does that mean? Well, basically it says that, yeah, you have a right to sue someone, but you can't be a jerk about it. You can't do it in bad faith, or with the only goal being to hurt someone, or without just basic honesty and good faith.
And that's exactly what Baltao was accusing Albenson of doing. So the million-peso question, literally, was this. Did Albenson act in bad faith? The Supreme Court went back and looked at everything. They saw that Albenson had checked the government records. They saw they'd verified with the bank. And they came to a crucial conclusion. Albenson had every reason to think they were suing the right guy. They were wrong, sure, but they were honest. They had acted in what the law calls good faith.
And the Supreme Court put it perfectly in their final decision. They called Albenson's error an innocent mistake, not an act of bad faith. And that single distinction, it changes everything.
And this brings us to the biggest, most important lesson from this whole saga. The crucial difference between actually being harmed versus having a legal right to get paid for that harm.
There's a cool Latin term for it. Damnum absque injuria. It just means damage without legal injury. Think about it. Was Eugenio S. Baltao, the father, damaged? Oh, absolutely. He had to deal with the stress, hire lawyers, he was wrongly accused, no doubt about it. But the Supreme Court said there was no legal injury. Why? Because the person who caused that damage, Albenson, was just exercising their own right to sue in good faith. And this quote right here, this is the mic drop. The court basically said, look, we can't punish people for using the courts just because they end up losing their case. If we did that, no one would ever file a lawsuit unless they were 100% sure they would win. People would be too scared to seek justice, and that's not a system anyone wants. And so, with that powerful principle in mind, the Supreme Court completely reversed the lower courts. That huge judgment wiped out. Albenson, the company that started this whole thing, just trying to collect on a tiny bounced check, walked away without having to pay a single peso in damages. So, in the end, this whole crazy case leaves us with a really important question. It protects our right to go to court, but it also shows us how important it is to act honestly and in good faith. So where do we draw that line between fighting for what's yours and just causing unfair harm to someone else? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.